Good afternoon. We are so glad to have you. I'm Gloria Nelson with TUG, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's TUG Connects 365 programming. As you settle in and get ready for the start of today's webinar, let me give a brief introduction for TUG, theusergroup.org, for both our current members and those of you who represent organizations that have not yet joined our online community of Infor distribution software users. We have all heard the phrase, knowledge is power, and I can say with confidence that after today's presentation, you'll be waking up tomorrow with a little more of both. But today is just one of our many in-depth sessions in our TUG Connects 365 series. TUG webinars, online forums, and member events facilitate the timely exchange of ideas and information to help you work smarter and with more confidence. And I don't know about you, but I believe that's a winning combination. If you're currently a member, it pays to get even more involved. And if you're not, please visit our website to discover why 2,300 heads are better than one to help you be the best at what you do. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Jim Spellos, President of Meetings U, pardon me. And he's going to be taking us through your digital presence. Is it really secure or an anonymous? Jim, go ahead and take it away.
Fantastic. We're going to make sure a screen showing right now, Gloria, right? We're all good?
We are all good.
Beautiful. Let's get this going. We get this show on the road. So here we go. Let's start just jumping right in there. 4 words. You are the product. You've probably heard that before. You've been listening to people talk about anonymity and security and privacy. That has become a sort of a catchphrase, but I want to show you something. I want to show you what we really mean by that. Got 2 logos on the screen. One is a product called Privacy Badger. The other is a product called Disconnect Me. And what I'm going to do right now is bounce over to my browser. So I'm on a generic Yahoo homepage. And I'm going to really focus your attention right now, because sort of the middle top of the screen, you might see a little circle hovering in. There are a couple of my Google apps that I'm running from the browser. The first one on the left here with a little number 54 is the site called Privacy Badger. Now let's take a look at that. What that means, what these folks are doing from a company called the Electronic Frontier Foundation, is that every single website that you are, that is connected, I should say, to Yahoo, you are being tracked there. And you have the ability using this particular tool to be able to say, no, I don't want to be tracked, or whether you're not sure or going very bottom line, you know, I can even say some of these, maybe I want to be tracked, but that's an awful lot that's happening. It's a single page. It's a single page with 54 tracks. And then if we click on the next, which is Disconnect Me, we're going to see over 100 different sites that are connected to this page where your information is going out to. That's staggering. That's staggering information. Now, I know there's a huge conversation that's out there about tools like this and privacy, but we got a bunch of things to unpack in about 45 minutes. We have to unpack the notion of privacy in the digital age, anonymity, security, and where it all stands. Now, in a normal time, I might actually show you my Google timeline for you to see where I've been, but these days it would show my bedroom to the bathroom to the kitchen to my office, back to the bathroom because I had too much coffee. You get the idea that it's not really going to be that effective. But if you go to Google Maps and you've been traveling somewhere and you've had your phone and you've had your location on, which we pretty much all do, some of you don't, which I think is pretty smart at sometimes. But with that said, it can actually track to the location where you've been on a given day. Man, oh man, that's staggering amounts of information that's out there. So we got to really set a context here. We are clearly more alike than we are different. However, you know, with all of our issues and the political issues and sports issues and music and how we eat and how we live, there's more that joins us together than separates us. However, we may be similar, but we're not anonymous. We are out there, especially in the past 25 years, with a very wide digital footprint. And it's very clear that organizations know successfully how to use that footprint to be able to deliver content, oftentimes marketing content, directly to you. And let's face it, I'd rather get an ad in Amazon about something that is pertinent to me than something that has no bearing in what I do. So again, we talked about this quote, if you're not paying for something, you are the product. Well, we've become the product in the digital age. Now, the real question here, is it all good or bad? And I think that's part of what everyone has to make is their decisions. But what we want to do today is to allow everybody to make intelligent choices. We want to show you what's out there. We want to show it from a privacy, anonymity standpoint and a security standpoint. And I do separate those two, and we'll make sure that we cover both of those during these 50 minutes. So in order to do that, let me ask you a question. What concerns you the most about your online presence right now? And what I'm going to do here is go to a poll. And if I actually knew how to use a computer, funny for the tech guy not to be able to do that, right? There we go. So it's going to be a text-based poll. You'll respond to 22333, and it's going to be essentially one of 4 different responses. So if you're most concerned about your privacy, then I want you to type in as the message 132347. If it's your security, 132350. If it's both your privacy and security, there's no one that you feel more concerned about more than the other, 132353. And if your response is neither, I lead a fairly boring life, then you can chime in with 132355. And again,
Jim,
these are tools. Yep.
I just wanted to clarify. I'm seeing some of the responses populate in the question bank. You need to use smartphones for this to have it populate. Am I correct?
Indeed you do, and that's a great point, Gloria, that this is a text-based, as I mentioned, application. And the reason we do text-based ones is because, let's face it, everyone does have a smartphone, and sometimes on some of the systems, the poll questions work well, don't well. That really doesn't matter, because right now what we want to do is take a look at where all of you are. So, do you really think that you have one major concern of security more than others? Let's take a look at the responses. And quite frankly, you guys are pretty set in both privacy and security. Nobody says they lead a boring life. If I was answering the question, Gloria, I might have said that, but I don't know. But for the most part, we're concerned about everything that's out there. It's great for us to be able to know that because, as we said, they're 2 different things and we have to deal with them separately and differently. So with that said, it really is as easy as PI, not that PI, but PII. Personally identifiable information. So here's the thing. There's a company called Redaris who deals in this personally identifiable information. And I wanted to find out, what do they know about me? I mean, is it really easy for an organization to be able to track and figure out what is needed to be known about you? Well, so I purchased for a couple of dollars what that report looks like, and here it is. And we're not going to go through everything here, but they know where I am. They know all my neighbors. They know my house. They know my history. Yikes, that's an awful lot of information. And this is a company that's just tracking very basic, publicly accessible information. I actually did that for my wife and did that for a couple of people to find out what is known. Kind of creepy. Kind of scary when you think about it, that the information that I'm not sending to them, I'm not telling them any of this, but it's all curatable and gatherable easily. And these companies are making a pretty big business out of being able to access this. So what do you think is being collected about you? And this is where I'm going to keep talking, but I'd love for you to put your thoughts in the chat. Don't put it in the Q&A area, put it in the chat area, and just a word or two here if you think it's what's being collected is purchasing power, put it there, whatever you think, because guess what? I don't think there's going to be a wrong answer in there. Everything is being collected, but I'm really interested to know where you are with all of that. So while you're doing that, and we'll come back to that later, I want to talk about, well, how does this information get to them and who them is, by the way. So we're going to start with cookies. And I think everyone who uses a computer has at least understood and heard the word cookies, but do we really know what they are? They've been around for over a quarter of a century, and now we're not talking the chocolate chip kind, mind. We're talking about cookies that actually help determine where you are on a website and what your actions are. In fact, they were created initially to serve a great purpose. And the purpose cookies were created for was to make sure that every time you came onto a website or even went to a different page, that the site would know it's you. And so they keep track of you on that site, so you don't have to log in every time you go from the home page to the second page to the third page and back and forth. And in fact, pretty much the law is that cookies from one website can't be read by another. So that cookie that's on the Amazon site, theoretically, is going to just be able to track you, and that's how they know when you come back to purchase something, where you were and what page you were on, and even what you were considering. In fact, you know, we have the conversation about artificial intelligence out there, where we look at Amazon's and Netflix and all that predictive marketing that's taking place. Well, part of that is in the cookie, but cookies aren't always great. So are the cookies focused on just tracking your session, or are they tracking you across the web? Now, we did say that's illegal, right? But not necessarily not done. And in fact, it's the cookie coming from the organization who has the website you're on, or is it a third party who puts a cookie on there to be able to track you and where you go? Remember, we saw that privacy badger and disconnect? You know, they're sort of tracking where you are. And then, by the way, how does Facebook know where I am? I mean, every time I'm doing something, that all of a sudden I pop up, I see an ad, and it's for something I just talked about 5 minutes ago. And although we can talk about this now in a very short amount of time that we have, the bottom line is that all of the tools that are out there are aggregating information, including the great voice tools that we use, be it Alexa or Google. You know, all that information is part of this privacy continuum that's there. Yet this isn't even the end of it by any means. So we've talked traditional cookies, but a couple of years ago, some major phone players got caught putting super cookies, headers that they were able to track, even though they're not part of the browser. They were able to put into the browser a tracking mechanism so that they knew where you were. They knew your habits, your history. Yikes. And then there's this information about fingerprints, digital fingerprinters. I want to show you something. An organization called the Electronic Frontier Foundation, they're the folks who put together Privacy Badger, have also put together this website that we're going to visit in a second. It's called Panopticlick, and it is about whether you are being tracked. So remember we said early that we're all kind of similar, but we're not all anonymous? Well, what this site does is enables you just to click a button, and it will tell you whether you are being tracked. Now, I got some protection on my browser. So is my browser blocking ads is the first thing they asked for, and I ran this a few minutes ago before we started. And yeah, my browser's blocking the ads. Blocking invisible trackers, yep, and block trackers included in the acceptable ads whitelist, yeah, but look at the bottom here. What I really want you to focus on is this fifth line. Does your browser protect from fingerprinting? And the answer is no. And what that means is that based on all the information that the computer is sending out, it provides and produces a unique profile. What does that include? Well, there's so much stuff that's there, but think about, you know, your location, the clock, and what time it is, and the browser you're using, and the version of OS that you're using. All of that constitutes a unique fingerprint. So even if you're trying to disguise your whereabouts, guess what? A tracker is able to identify you just from your computer and your browser without any other information. Now, there are some browsers that are trying to put up a good fight. We're not going to talk about the Tor browser, which has a huge negative connotation, but it is the most privacy-rich browser out there. But for ones you might be familiar with, and hopefully you are, Firefox in January put a stop, at least in theory, to any type of browser fingerprinting by having it built into their mechanism. And in fact, there are alternative browsers that if you really are concerned about your privacy, and let's face it, gang, we give up an awful lot in Google and in Firefox and in all the sites that we regularly visit. But a browser such as Brave, which has had a couple of issues lately about perhaps selling information out, which surprised everybody, but they also have the ability to prevent fingerprinting, which means that if you're logging onto a site, the people who are on the receiving end can't tell who it is just by that browser fingerprint, the one that we saw with the Panopticlick site. So it's not all that isn't enough. then let's deal with location. And boy, this is a huge double-edged sword too. Next week I'm doing a webinar for you guys on case of emergency and what happens if something physically happens to you. And you'll hear my story about that next week. So for me, I keep location on all the time. I know there's a convenience approach to keeping it on, but I keep it on for health and medical reasons. Yet, there's lots of tools that are out there that have enabled that tracking to really just take you to such a dangerous place. An app many years ago called Brightest Flashlight that's been out there for a while. They were sharing unique location information and device information to third parties without disclosing that it did so. This was about 7, 8 years ago now. Early on in the apps, the FTC sort of came down really hard on them. But think about it, that the app that you download will provide more information to companies than a web visit. So you might want to be really, really clear that if you have apps sitting on your phone that you haven't used in a while, why are you keeping them? If you're concerned about your privacy, if you're concerned about being able to try to be a little more stealth in every movement that you make, maybe you really want to have fewer apps rather than more. And then location, obviously a huge conundrum with this information, that I want the convenience. I want to be able to be given information that really does provide me context sensitive marketing. That I know that if I'm near a particular store, something that I've ordered before is available there. Could be location based, it just could be web based, but that location conundrum is a real trade-off. Also, if we talk about smartphones at all, we can discuss the fact that the location is a huge draw on your battery power on top of that all. So do I keep my location on? I do. So where have we gone so far? And Gloria, this might be a good place to see if there are any questions. Let me just throw this on the screen right now. And because we talked about our information is available. Cookies are a good tool, but they can track us, and we can use these tools to see the extent of the tracking. So I'm just curious, Gloria, do we have any questions that have come up in chat yet that really give us information or have people just questioning what they're doing with security?
We don't have any questions that have popped up yet, but I did want to ask you, you had mentioned that you might be having some resources available that you'll be letting us upload along with the PDF of your slides. Can you tell us a little about that?
Sure thing. That is the resource. And in fact, the PDF of these slides at the very back, and you'll see it when we finish this up, we'll talk about a lot of the tools that I'm going to showcase today, plus a listing of further resources of articles where people can dive deeper. Because you know what, Gloria? 45, 50 minutes on any of this is never enough time to do anything more than scratch the surface. And the idea today is not to scare people. The idea is to make us all educated consumers about our own information. So we've gotten this far talking about some basic stuff, but here's the question that really comes up. How does all this information from disparate places, from our web browsing and from our phone and from maybe something we purchased on Amazon, how does it all come together? And the answer is data brokers. A data broker is an organization or company that collects information and sells it to folks wanting information about a particular target group. They might want to know if they're a shoe manufacturer. They just want to know what people have bought certain products and what people, have certain requests and certain preferences there. But this is a huge under the radar business that's out there. There are lots of companies that are doing this, but you still think, even in years ago, was this really possibly put together? And I want to show you a video. A really incredibly smart woman by the name of LaTanya Sweeney, when she was a grad student at Harvard. Right now she's a master's in education and she works at Stanford, but she tells a story that you're about to see regarding how information in the early digital age, we're talking the 1990s, could be easily put together with just a few pieces of information. So I'm not going to really do any more talking. I'm going to let LaTanya tell the story about her information and conversation with a colleague that got her thinking about anonymity. Let's start it right now.
And one day an ethicist came by and I heard her say, computers are evil. Me, who was passionately in love with technology, I had to stop because I was clearly going to have to correct her thinking. But she foretold a situation in which really is the world we have today. and the year back then was at the mid-1990s. And she described a world in which information was flowing from individuals freely, and that the consequence of that was that many social contracts and many new harms were going to be possible. And so I told her, but look at all the benefits of sharing all this data. We might have new medical discoveries and so forth. And so she pointed to a particular data set that had just been released. It was medical information on state employees, their families, and retirees. And the Venn diagram you see in the upper left corner is an example of the kind of data that was given away. It didn't have name or address, but it did include diagnosis codes, procedure codes, and basic demographics, so 5-digit zip code, month, day, and year of birth, and gender. And so I said to her, well, why do you think that's anonymous? And I said, look, there are 365 days in a year. Let's say people live 100 years and 2 genders. That's over 70,000 combinations per 5-digit zip code. But I happen to know that at that time, there were only about 20,000 people living in a particular 5-digit zip code. And so I wanted to test that this was right. So William Weld, who was the governor of Massachusetts at the time, had collapsed. And there wasn't much information about him in the public media. But on the other hand, his information was in this data set. He lived in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and his demographics were well known. So for $20, I went and I purchased the Cambridge voter list, and it came on 2 floppy diskettes. And I was able to show that only 6 people in that voter data had his date of birth. Only 3 of them were men, and he was the only one in his 5-digit zip code. That meant that that combination was unique for him, and therefore it was unique in the data.
Pretty amazing stuff when you think about that. That 25 years ago, using publicly accessible information, they were able to put that information together. What they were able to determine is what actually happened to Governor Weld and the medication that he was being given. You would think with all the privacy that's out there, that would never have happened. Well, today, those type of tools are clearly the realm of data brokers. Companies like Epsilon and Axiom are out there. Great stat, just a great piece of information to know. The United States is one of the only Western countries that doesn't have a law that allows us to see the data that's being gathered. Now, I know a lot of that is in the context of changing right now, but it really does put a huge spin on all of the privacy that's out there. Now, you probably put stuff in chat about how people and what people are, what you're concerned about regarding being viewed, but what are they looking for? Well, some of them are looking for marketing, advertising opportunities. In some cases, risk mitigation, fraud detection. A lot of the stuff that's out there actually is for our protection as well. And that's what makes this conversation kind of tricky and kind of difficult. And clearly with what we saw with Redaris, this ability to search for people. Now, with that said, now we get another curveball thrown. And the curveball is COVID. Because if we were really concerned about our privacy, now we have an opportunity to have a tool that might give up even more of our privacy, but in exchange for protection and safety. That's really tricky. Now, did you know that in the past 6 months, Apple and Google have been working collectively on a tool that will allow a contact tracing app to work? They don't make the contact tracing app. However, any of the state health departments that do can use these tools. Now, let's take a look at something. I read this article and I go, wait a minute. I know there's not one from my state, New York, but there got to be some in the App Store. So I went and I heard about this Virginia contact tracing from that article I just mentioned. And there it was at the very bottom of the screen, COVID-wise. So I installed it. I got a welcome screen. It told me, thanks, it's voluntary, no GPS location or PII will ever be collected or stored. And in fact, continues to talk about what happens in terms of exposure and how it gets collected. People have different things they start thinking about with all this, but I gotta tell you something, and this is something you can do right now. You can go to your phone, whether it's an Android or an iPhone. You can follow those steps in Android settings, Google, and then look for COVID-19 exposure notifications. On the iPhone, settings, privacy, health, COVID-19 exposure logging. And you will see in one of the more recent updates to your phone, something you probably never knew that occurred, this was placed in there. So Apple and Google created this app, created this tool, I should say, that's supported by an app. They upgraded your phone to include it, but they didn't turn it on automatically. At least they should not have. And now you have this ability. So if we were to go back to the previous screen, that last exposure notification, the working of a tracking app like this only works if you put that on. Problem and the challenge with privacy conversation is it's not an easy conversation to have, and I clearly see both sides of the privacy discussion. But as we move the transition from privacy to security, then we start seeing stuff like this. We start seeing websites, COVID-19 pandemic, $1,200 stimulus check. Is that a legitimate site? No, it wasn't a legitimate site. This is all coming up to prey on our insecurities and our fears of what is going on. So we got to get our shields up. Gloria, just curious right now, because we're about to move from the privacy conversation into the security conversation. Just wondering if you have anything out there, questions that people are asking us, anything that's really floating your boat in this conversation.
I actually had one that populated right after we jumped back on after the last question break. What is the name of the site you referenced? Was that Panopticlick that you were on, Jim?
Yeah, indeed it was. Let me show it so it's easy for the people to see it. It's a funny name, Panopticlick. It's panopticlick.eff. EFF stands for Electronic Frontier Foundation.org. And if you just did a search for Panopticlick, safe or tracking or browsing, you're going to come right to this page. It's not even a download, it's just available for people to access.
And will that be in your resource handout also, just so people know?
Indeed it will, absolutely.
Okay. That's
cool.
It that we have right now.
Shields up. Let's now get our protection going, because as we make this move from privacy to security, let's understand that sometimes we're sure and sometimes we're not. So I got a game to play with you. We're going to call this real deal or phishing scam. So what I want you to do as I show these, I want you to put in chat or wherever you want to post it, or just yell it out loud, whether you think this is a real, legitimate, proper, should be followed email, or it's a phishing scam. By the way, all of these emails you're about to see are things that came into my inbox in the past year. First one, Netflix. Huge image. Your account has been suspended, dear Netflix. We are said, don't you hate when they just intentionally do things wrong? Send this email to let you know your credit card has been expired. Not even good English there. To update your account information, please visit your account. Well, we're pretty clear that this is a phishing scam, right? This is classic information. If you clicked on that your account, you'd probably go to a faux Netflix site, which would ask for your username and password. That should already bring up all of your defenses. But if you don't and you put that in there, you'll probably get an error message. Sorry, the site's down. Come back later, and they have all your information. Classic phishing scam. Okay, so we got that one out of the way. That anybody who is thinking about this probably should realize there's nothing outside of complete, utter disrespect for the law. Now we get to this. And this has come in the past couple of months. It actually came from one of my medical providers, and it was from this healthcare place. And all it said in the title was exciting news. And then it had at the very bottom a link to a document. Real deal or phishing scam? You know, my defenses get up on this. I did not click on that document. Why? Because I know how easy it is to forge something using somebody's email address. So I actually contacted my doctor. I said, did you send something out on Monday? And the answer was, yeah, we did. We sent about this new letter that we had regarding a particular product. That's real deal. But you know what? If your healthy skepticism's out there, you probably caught that and wouldn't have clicked on that link, because clicking on a document like that or clicking on a link could completely damage your computer. So now we got 1 and 1. Tiebreaker here. In May, I get this from the Department of Labor in New York State. This is the entire email. I get attention. And by the way, it's from no reply, which always puts my defenses on alert. You have an urgent message from the New York State Department of Labor. Please sign in. Notice that the hyperlink's a little beyond the text, using your New York Gov with an extra space ID. Damn, I gotta be fake. I'm not gonna go there. Showed it to my wife, and she said, you know, you should better log on and find out what they have to say. I go, but don't you see that's clearly not legit? But I figured this needs some more exploration. So you saw that first sign in and then that second NY.gov. Well, I started to take a look at where it actually brings you to and what their real sign-in page was. So for sign-in, the link was applications.labor.ny.gov/individual reg, where the actual just was individual. It may be a red flag there, but what I would really be looking for the most part, I'd be looking for this top level domain just before the dot. I want to see whether they put something else fake in there, like labor.ny.covid.gov. That would automatically mean to me that this is not legitimate. But I'm still not sure right now, so I checked the other link that was there, and it was very, very similar. One was technically a secure site, even though the site is secure. One had the www, the other didn't. Guess what? That's legit. That's really bad protocol. That's really bad digital protocol, because I would not have clicked that. My life depended on it. That looks so suspicious, especially in this day of COVID. And then you got the scams that are coming with financial stimulus. So we'll just race through these. 145,000 suspicious domains this year, 60,000 fake banking sites created, huge increase in promising small business loans. Then you get this piece of malicious software with an email saying business continuity plan announcement starting. Do you get it? Do you get that all the stuff that looks legit but somehow makes you think maybe it isn't? You better be suspect. You better think before you click. This is a classic piece of malware. All this does, if you clicked on that link, was to steal your credentials and make your computer into a keystroke lock. Really nice. It means that every single thing you press on your keyboard, it can see, and it can see all your usernames and passwords, and boy, wouldn't that be massive trouble. And then you got the phishing targeted help. Gosh, it's incredible what's going on here. The CARES Act stimulus scam from American Express. It says, please tap here to proceed in the middle of the document. So we show what you're actually tapping on, which is a fake Google Doc that probably has a huge payload in there. These are all scams. These are all phishing scams and other types of malicious software that are affecting you. And we haven't even talked about ransomware. The fact that if you click on a phishing link, sometimes you just don't get a piece of code put in your computer. You completely encrypt your entire computer or your entire organization's computers. That's what ransomware is. The picture on the left is an interesting story. It's a 4-star resort in Austria, and they were very tech savvy, and they had all the room keys in the hotel set up so that it was automated. You can get into your room by app. Well, they send a piece of ransomware to the hotel. Somebody on staff, nobody knows who, clicked on it. And not only did it lock out every single computer, it locked out every guest from their room. Wow, pretty clever, isn't it? So these folks did two things. They paid the ransom. It wasn't a huge amount from what I understand, maybe $1,500. And then they went public with the story because they wanted organizations to know what not to do and how legitimate these types of ransomware scams are. They doubled last year. And in fact, that still might not be the biggest scam out there. Cryptocurrency, people trying to get and win Bitcoin and other of those cryptocurrencies, they do so by having great and strong mathematical co-processing computers. Well, they don't have that. But what if they tapped into yours? So they'll put a piece of malicious software on your computer that will tap into your computing power. So if your computer starts running slowly and your electricity bill starts going up, you better run a good anti-malware solution. So we gotta now talk about solutions, but before we do, there's one more thing here, that the weakest link isn't all the stuff coming in. The weakest link is you and me, is that how easy it is to deceive us. And there are so many great stories. Go on to YouTube when you get a chance. Do a search for DEFCON, DEFCON, and it would be cell phone hacking. And you're gonna see videos of these hackers doing this in a test information so they can actually show you how it works, calling phone companies and getting them to give up your own password. My gosh, is it that easy for us to be socially engineered? It is way creepy. I'm just convinced on that. So we've painted a fairly ugly picture. Let's paint something prettier. Let's talk about what you need to do. 5 solutions that are critical for your security protection. And will help with your privacy too, by the way. I'm going to talk antivirus, anti-malware, VPN, password manager, and 2FA, two-factor authentication. Do them one at a time. Number one, antivirus. You got a computer, it's probably on there already. It's pre-installed. Don't go messing with it. Okay, don't futz with it at all. If you have something on your computer, max it out. If you have a computer from work, don't do anything trying to go around or get another antivirus. That's the worst thing you can do. Many of you who work in IT know that. You don't want people, oh, I'll put my own antivirus. No, you don't want to do that. If you need one for yourself though, and you get a computer that doesn't have one, do a good Google search, do your due diligence, find curated sites that will give you information that you can trust to find which of the ones that are out there are best. I've used most of them. I've used Kaspersky, I've used Trend, I've used Panda, I've used AVG. I'm not a big fan of Norton actually, but that and McAfee were the ones for years that were pre-installed in all the computers. And I'm going to make this statement, and I know people will argue with me, but I think this is of the 5 steps we're going to talk about, the one that's least important, but the reality is it is exceptionally important. So make sure you have antivirus, make sure it's protected. Your antivirus solution may have an anti-malware component as well. But unlike antivirus, you can have multiple anti-malware solutions on your computer. Now, I'll never recommend any one product over another. I will always share with you what I use. And what I use is a tool that's called Malwarebytes. I'm actually going to bring up the real tool as opposed to the image of it right here. Every day it does a scan, but even more importantly, what an anti-malware solution does that's always active is it prevents things from getting to your computer without giving you a heads up that something that is dangerous has entered your computer. Do you want to run it or do you want to quarantine with it? And guess what? Anytime a legitimate anti-malware solution tells me there's a fishy piece of information accessing my computer, I'm going to listen. No question about it. So step 2, have anti-malware. If you do have one of a number of antivirus company solutions out there, they might have an anti-malware solution. They'll charge you an extra $10, $15, or $20 a year for it. Use it. This is not where you want to be cheap. You want to make sure you have a bunch of protection. Antivirus 1, anti-malware 2, a VPN, a virtual private network. This will encrypt your information from where you are to the servers well beyond your location. In the time of COVID, where a lot of us are working out of home, not as critical as when we are in hotels or in coffee shops and we're using the public Wi-Fi. Whether it's free or not has no bearing, neither one is secure. But the virtual private network will make sure that anything you send out from your computer, including web addresses and passwords and usernames, is encrypted, is scrambled, so that prying eyes with a free piece of software can't see it. Critical part of your protection. And by the way, when you get this, it's as if not more important to have it on your mobile devices as it is on a traditional laptop or PC. In fact, what I use, a product called Tunnel Bear, sits on my computer, on my phone, and on my tablet, and I feel really good about all 3 of those locations having proper virtual private network protections. Number 4, the password conversation. I don't want to hear that you use the same password over and over and over again. This is the biggest issue that you can create to cause problems, because if someone actually gets one of your passwords, what do you think they're going to do? Well, the first thing is, well, do they use that password for Amazon? Do they use it for their bank? Do they use it for their airline? Do they use it for Netflix? Do they use it for Grubhub? Guess what? You lose at that point. However, we got to go over the passwords you absolutely shouldn't use. And these are a list curated by people in the tech industry of the last year's most popular passwords. Top 10 list. We'll start from number 10. 123 123. Please don't tell me in chat if any of you are using any of these passwords. Okay. Number 9 is 111111, because obviously 123 123 was too hard to remember. Number 8 was I love you, all lowercase, really will confuse the bad guys, no question about that. Number 7 is 12345, because 6 digits just is too much to remember. Number 6, let's get really sophisticated and go 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. Fifth on the list brings it back 1 digit to 7. Fourth on the list is the word password, which, by the way, is the default password for many products, including your router. We'll get to that in a second. Number 3, QWERTY, because obviously people won't be able to figure out the top of the keyboard, right, as a password option. Number 2 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. These people probably feel immense levels of security by having 9 digits there. And the number 1 most popular password last year for the 3rd straight year, by the way, was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't want to hear if any of you use any of these. You shouldn't. You need something in place called a password manager. You want to be able to make sure that your passwords are protected. By the way, we talked about router password. We'll get to that password manager in a second. All of the routers that are out there have a generic site called routerpasswords.com. Sometimes it's router-passwords.com, and you can see the default username and password. So if I'm I'm in an apartment and I see other people's Wi-Fi, I can just take a guess at what they're using and could possibly crack into their entire network, just because the password that these organizations used were either admin, as you see a lot of it on the screen, or the word password. Pretty amazing, isn't it? So let's get back to the password manager for a second. I use a product called Dashlane. There's another good one called LastPass. There are some illegitimate ones, and do your due diligence. But the thing with these is if I needed to go, let's say, to the Adobe site, I can go and click on more. I can go and let me edit the item, and it'll show me the password, and I can even show it. No way. You see, it's going to stop right now, because what these tools use is a single master password. And you have to remember, and they don't keep track of it. And with that master password, it is the key to the kingdom. The beautiful thing about that is all your other passwords can be generic. I don't know my passwords. I have no idea of what they are. Why? Because I just need to have a password manager that works with all my devices and that protects me to be able to log in as simply as possible, but also as safely as possible. Password manager. By the way, if I'm at your home or at your desk at work one day and you forgot your Wi-Fi password, don't worry, because it's all logged in DOS anyway, so I can grab that. Passwords, you really need to make sure you have them even now when we're at home most of the time, because that's where that hacking, it's even more important than a VPN in the age of COVID. Lastly, two-factor authentication. You log into a site and then all of a sudden they say they want to send you a 5 or 6 digit code. Use it. That's a great way, because even if they get your password or they don't have your phone, they may not have access to your information. Authy is a tool that's out there that is used by a number of sites. I'm very active in Facebook using the two-factor authentication code generator that's built into Facebook. Every time I log on to Facebook, it takes me about 2 minutes. But guess what? I know that I'm protected there. And that's the balance, that's the whole balance we've been talking about, right, Dan? We're talking about that safety, privacy, security, anonymity. We have to make a decision, and I'm clear from my perspective, that while the privacy conversation, there's a lot of give and take on, this last section of the session, where we're talking about security applications and security flaws, I don't want to be part of those. They're going to go for low-hanging fruit. I don't want my access points to be part of that low-hanging fruit, and I clearly don't want to make silly mistakes like clicking on links that can affect my computer instantaneously. And if I do make that mistake, I want to make sure that I have tools such as anti-malware solutions that might be able to, and have at times have done that for me, stop those files from infiltrating my computer. Wow. So you're using all of them: antivirus, anti-malware, VPN, password manager, two-factor authentication. We're not done yet. Another layer. Know those updates that we all hate on Windows? And I just was reading something about Windows that they're going to a less frequent update channel, but I'm not sure if this has to do with security or just trying to tinker with how their program works. Oftentimes those updates use what they call zero-day attacks. These are attacks that the bad guys have found holes in the operating system. And what they need to do, and do quickly, is patch it up and send that patch out to you. And that's oftentimes what that update is. So you get those annoying, restart your computer to finish installing important updates. Okay, maybe let it go till the end of the day, but don't forget to do it. Make sure you do it. I know, and I say that, and I know there are times that some of the updates have messed up people's computers. and he's got to figure out which rifle is loaded, which rifle isn't at that point. It's annoying. I got it, but it also serves as huge layer of protection. So after all this, was that your approach to privacy and security? I mean, really, was it an open back door leading out to a beautiful backyard? Why don't we do this? Why don't we go right now to do a scorecard? I'm a teacher. I'm allowed to do tests, right? So we're gonna do a test right now. The test is, can you get 100 points on a test regarding your security? Okay, each of these has a number of points. We'll be on the honor system. You can actually tally up yourself and definitely use the chat to put in there what your score was. I'm gonna say 75 is passing because I think 70 is too easy. So do you have an antivirus product up and always running on your computer? If you do, I'll give yourself 10 points. Nice start. What about anti-malware solution always running? Another 10 points. And if you have them both coupled in the antivirus, cool, that's great, that works too, but make sure they're always on. Do you always use a personal VPN when on public Wi-Fi? If you do, when we're out there, give yourself 15 points. That's 35 points already, almost halfway to passing, just to have those 3 things. But wait, there's lots more. Auto updates. Do you use them? 15 points. Halfway there, halfway to a perfect score. Next up, do you only use Apple products? I know Apple is safer than the Android. Clearly the store is safer. But here's the thing. I'm going to give you a huge total of nothing, no points whatsoever for Apple. Why? 2 words. Social engineering. It's not just about the device. It's about our awareness to be able to stay protected. And as good as the Apple devices are, and they are good, it really doesn't do any good if you click on that silly link. Get it? Do you use a password manager? If you do, 10 points. Do you only download apps from official app stores? This may not apply to you and me, but if you have kids and they're gamers, they might go to a lot of different sites, what they call back or side loading apps, third-party sites to download apps. The likelihood of a dangerous app in a Google, Android store, I should say, or Apple store is minimal. Clearly a lot more on the Android store than on Google, but on those third-party sites, it's exponentially larger. So don't do that, and if you don't, and most of us don't, 10 points. Do you only click on an email link if you're 100% certain it's authentic? Those links we saw on Netflix, those links we saw in the Department of Labor, 10 points for that. And by the way, even clicking on my doctor's attachment, that would also have applied here. The most updated version of your browser, 5 points. 2-step authentication, 10 more points. If nobody else used your device, 5 points. Did you pass? Did you get 70 points? If you didn't, I'm going to give you some bonus points. If you have lots of common sense, give yourself nothing. Sorry, you're not going to get anything with common sense. We know how easy it is to get past that. If you use Internet Explorer, I want you to take away 10 points because you shouldn't be using Internet Explorer. If you have to use a Microsoft browser, use Edge. Even Microsoft will tell you that. Any kids under 21 using your computer, take away 25 points. If your parents are using your computer, take away another 25 points. And if they're both using a computer, just get a new device, okay? Just pretty simple, right? At this point, you don't know what's on there. You need to make sure you're protected. So what do you take from this? We've talked for almost 50 minutes about a lot of great stuff about privacy in COVID. We talked about security. We talked about phishing scams. We talked about implementing solutions there. If you can pull one new idea out of this and implement it right away, you're going to be that much more safe and secure in this process. So this is where we're going to actually send you the PDF, because we talked about some of these. We didn't even talk about all of them at this point, but tools like Privacy Badger, Disconnect Me, Panopticlick, Privacy Tools, there's a bunch of stuff that's out there that if you're really serious about your privacy, you might want to consider. And by the way, there are articles, and we'll make sure that the URLs are here as well, that will give you more great privacy and security resources. The bottom line is simple. The hackers aren't going away. You are the product. Hey, Gloria, we're done with this right here. I'd love to know if we have any questions or comments that are out there from the folks. I really want to make sure that people do have a sense of that this is not difficult to be able to do. We just got to be aware. So what do you think, Gloria?
I'm looking to see if anything populates. Right now, I haven't seen any new questions since the one about the Panopticlick.
Do you use all these tools, Gloria?
Do I?
Yeah.
Look at this face. I would have to say an unequivocal no. I use some of the tools, but not all of the tools.
Good.
I am an across the board Apple user on all technology. And I have found that when I have downloaded products in the past that it slows the speed significantly on an Apple MacBook Pro or MacBook.
Yeah.
And I'm always extremely cautious with regard to looking at links. And if I ever have any question, I go directly to my stored bookmarks.
Yep.
And look at them there. Let me just share very quickly that Ariel Morgan says, thoughts in browser extensions and their safety or usefulness.
I'm probably talking about Firefox. Okay, browser extensions, I use them. Okay, and that's how I'm going to start this conversation. I use them in Firefox. I use them even more extensively in Chrome, which is my browser of choice. I do my due diligence before I download any extension. I don't just take it as solid that all the extensions in those stores are legit. So what I do, is my strategy, is I hear about a good extension. Let's say Privacy Badger. I'll go to Google and I will put the words Privacy Badger in the search box with one other word, and that word is malware, as in malicious software, brought together into malware. So malware Privacy Badger. And I look at the results. If what's going to come up, people talking about that Privacy Badger is good, it's okay, it's not bad, I'm pretty comfortable at that point. But if all of a sudden I start seeing, this stuff stole my information and did this and did that, then that's the red flag. I'm looking for those red flags that the community will identify. Now, there is one of the tools that I have on the list that's called the Web of Trust. Let me, it's actually a little green light, red light, yellow light that appears on my searches from Google. So when it shows me a site, it'll show me a little dot, and if it says green, it has they're okay, they're a blessing. It's yellow, and they're not sure. If it's red, don't go there. Interesting story about that is they got caught getting hacked, and for a while the Web of Trust app and extension was pulled from the stores, but they've sort of got themselves back into good graces. So it's an ongoing, it's an organic process. So you have to be aware, but there's tools that are out there that can make sure that any extension that they use is as safe as possible.
Well, and I think a good measure, and I put it in the chat window, is look before you click. I think that when we hover over sites or right click on it to see the point of origin, and as I shared, if I get something from Amazon, okay, maybe I need a little 12-step program with being sequestered at home with Amazon. I'm on an intimate relationship basis, knowing every first name driver that comes in with a UPS truck to my house. But so there's communication that goes back and forth. What I always do is I will always go to the Amazon secured site and I will look at my orders and the status there. I don't click and go direct. I think it's just something that I adopted years and years ago to be safe versus sorry.
We have to really have our radar open and out when we go to a site, because it's so easy for someone to put a fake site up there. In fact, I remember years ago, or at least 10, maybe even 15, that if you accidentally typed goggle instead of Google, your computer could be hijacked. You'd go to a fake site that would drop a payload of bad information and files onto your computer just by going to the site. They call that a drive-by payload. So you did nothing other than misspell the darn URL and you got that. Now, they've obviously taken care of that one, but it's why a lot of people I know who are very smart oftentimes don't use the URL bar, but they always go through the search engine. I think it's going 2 steps rather than 1, but I get everybody's concern and everybody's nuance in terms of how they're dealing with their own privacy. It's important to be comfortable with all this.
Right. One of the things I did want to share with you is Katie Birchfield posted and said, awesome, I love this. So props to you, Jim, for bringing great content as always.
What's interesting is that this session could be one of the most important sessions that I give, yet a lot of people are so uncomfortable going to it because it does open them up in terms of what they need to do and what they haven't done, not right or wrong, but to protect themselves. And I
Right.
think it's a really important dialogue for people to have, and always check to make sure that they have the latest and the best information that's out there.
Right, right. So important in today's world of technology. Well, that's all the questions that we have had that have populated. What I would just like to say at this juncture, first of all, is thanks to everyone who has been online with us for the duration. We didn't lose very many people because the content was so incredibly rich. We know sometimes you get pulled away to other responsibilities on your job. So thankful, Jim, that you allow us to record this and make it available for everyone. And typically it's posted one business day after the program concludes. So number one, Jim, thank you so much for the in-depth content and showcasing all of this information to our TUG members. And the other thing is I'd like to just say to those of you who are members of TUG, let's continue this discussion online in the forums. Probably the best place is in the all member forum because it crosses all ERP channels, all different segments of our membership with regard to, types of distribution users. And for those of you who are not yet members, please visit the usergroup.org website, www.theusergroup.org, and join us today. And again, Jim, thanks so much as always. We'll look forward to the next time. But as they say in Hollywood, that's a wrap. Have a great day, everyone.